Ready. Hey guys, welcome again to another episode of the Adventist Asia Podcast. I'm Tony Stanier and I'll be your host today. If this is your first time tuning in, I invite you to follow and like our pages on Facebook, on Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. And of course, you can find this podcast on Spotify. Just look for the Adventist Asia Podcast. Today, I'm happy to be with Pastor Bryan Tolentino, or Dr. Bryan Tolentino, and we would like to spend this time, Pastor, to learn more about you and the ministries that you have been doing. So, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey as a pastor?
Not yet a doctor. I have not given any prescription yet. Okay. No. I mean, I've been writing my project, but I think you were there when I began my ministry back in AUP. I was the youth pastor. Mm-hmm. The journey was 2 SSDs, quite, rough and exciting. Well, it's been a growing time for me since then.
Mm-hmm. Pastor, your work for our division is in charge or directing the office or the department of Spirit of Prophecy and the Adventist Heritage Center. Could you give us a little input of what that is and how you function in that department?
Well, let me compartmentalize the two because the two are a little different. The Spirit of Prophecy is a department of the church that that begins from the Joy Conference, E.G. White, Spirit of Prophecy department, and then to the division and goes to the counterparts down to the level of the church. While the Adventist Heritage is a center found here in the division, and we hope that we would grow this center so that there will be more centers. And we also are helping our unions and other educational institutions to put up an E.G. White centers across the division.
Mm-hmm. What for you? What does that mean for us to have these centers? What does it do for us? I mean, me being a member of the church, I'm just going to church on Sabbath or being partaking in the ministries. But what does this Heritage Center have to do for me?
Okay. First, let's talk about what does it do to our organization. It's like a compass for our organization. It leads us to how to study our Bibles. How do we interpret our Bible in such a way that it focuses on what it needs to focus, like the cross, Jesus Christ, salvation, and at the same time, how we can stay track with the scriptures, because sometimes, the church would go out of its way if it's not guided by the scripture. Second is that we have a gift that was given to the church. We call this the gift of prophecy. This is both a doctrine and at the same time a department with the church, because there have been a tremendous blessing, not only as an organization, but individually, if we read the writings of Ellen White. And we know that there are about 100,000 manuscripts of Ellen White, that if we read this and practically apply it, it would be a tremendous blessing both to the mission of the church and to the individuals, especially as they lead to the scriptures and to Jesus.
You were saying that it kind of states maybe a part of our history that's found there, and being that it's the Spirit of Prophecy. It sounds like, from my perspective, that's a lot of reading. That's a lot of things that you have to know and understand. How did this become a passion of yours? How did you get involved with the Spirit of Prophecy? You're sort of like the expert per se on this. How did you go down that path?
I think it's more of a passion that it started. Of course, I've read the writings of Ellen White. It was required in the college. But when I graduated, I happened to read one book, and that gave me so much impetus or gusto on reading the writings of Ellen White. When you hear a speaker and you don't know the speaker, you're not interested of what he's about to say. So I read this book. This is in Guagua, Pampanga. I took this book and I read it for the whole week. The title of the book is Life Sketches of Ellen G. White. And I read it the whole week. From that on, I just committed to just not read anything until I read the Bible and the writings of Ellen White. For 3 years, I just committed myself reading this. But it took me a while to balance everything, And that is the story of my life, why I want to be expert, because most of the time I was not really balanced in reading the writings of Ellen White, and it took me a while to do that.
Yeah, maybe we can maybe dig a little bit into that further on. So you having this passion now for the spirit of prophecy, and this seems like old things, like it's the things that are in the past, right? Is there any significance, like you said earlier, it's a gift to our church? So what is that gift? What makes that significant for us as a church?
I think for me, I was like 23 years old when I read that, and it becomes so relevant to me. Because you read the writings of Ellen White, especially the life of Ellen White, she was young, she was broken, there were a lot of discouragement, and yet she was resilient to all this discouragement. And she loved the Bible and Jesus so much. And I think this kind of passion is the same as the passion that we have today.
Mm-hmm.
Only that she was old because she was way back, but she was young during her time. Mm-hmm. I think it resonates not only to me, but to the rest of the young people, even today.
You talk about it resonating. If you talk about me reading the book, I often see it in black and white. Like it's old movies. I mean, like I grew up in VHS days, where the color is kind of weird and everything. How do you go about bringing life into that, into the old manuscripts and those stories that makes it relevant for our young people?
I think it interplays. Now I remember it interplays with my passion for history. The longest reading I would read when I was second year high school was only the examination paper. But when my teacher opened up history in my eyes, I read the whole book, and it fascinated me. And then what fascinates me are not dates, names of people and events. It's hard to memorize, but the reality of what really happened and the context of how it happened. So as I link Ellen White together with my passion for history, I would know the context. And that context gives me the idea of how to apply it today, because it's different. Today is different, but the principle remains. Mm-hmm. The principle remains.
I like what you're saying, Pastor, the principles. You were saying earlier that there was a time in your life where there was an imbalance, or there's this battle or this challenge of balancing the words that we read from Ellen White. I grew up in a culture where someone would use Ellen White or the writings to explain something that I did wrong, depending on the scenario, growing up in high school, of course. So how did you go about that in learning that there should be a balance in understanding and reading and contextualizing all these experiences?
Okay, before I explain about principles and balance, let me explain about my journey.
Sure.
My journey was like a pendulum. On the other extreme, and then trying to balance, I was on the other extreme. But you will learn your lesson. So these are my 4-part journey. Number 1, the journey of chaos. Mm-hmm. No direction. No compass. I just live a life, the way I knew, the best I knew. But the second is I want to have a more stable, I would say, principle. But I thought it was a principle. But these were just standards, laws, rules, regulation. And I was very strict on that. But I found out that even in English grammar, there are a lot of exemptions. So how do I make sense of these exemptions? So I need to have a rule. So I was like, how do I do this? Because there are many exemptions. Then I went to the third phase. We call it the search for principle. Okay. There, I searched for the principle. And the third is now, after I have known the principle, which I'm about to tell later, I have come to integration. How do I integrate this now? Whether it is in the 19th century or the 18th century, or whether in the 26th or 25th century, 22nd century, it will remain the same. For me, practice changes. Principles never change. From Adam till the end of time, the principle never change. I don't know if you have heard about this. Take, for example, health is a principle. Vegetarianism is a practice.
Okay.
So at the beginning, they practice health. Till the end, we practice health. Temperance is a principle. How do you apply temperance depends upon from date to date. Say, take for example, veganism is a practice. Vegetarianism is a practice. Fruitarianism is a practice. All are practices. But what are the underlying principles that never change? This is health and temperance must be there at all times. Sabbath keeping is not a principle. Sometimes they think that Sabbath keeping is a principle. No. Sabbath keeping principles are rest, worship, and health. These are principles. It never changes from any time. But Sabbath keeping is the practice of that principle. Just to give you an example.
I like that. I mean, yes. Yeah. So how did you now, I mean, you said it was a journey for you. Was there like, maybe for our listeners and for those who are maybe going through the same experiences, how long did it take you to go through this journey of this pendulum? Because maybe I'm someone that might be on one side or I might be on the other side of this extreme pendulum. How was that journey? And did it take time? Was it study more? Was it the contextualization that you were having there so that you can take the principle and the practice and then you can integrate them? What did that look like for you?
Okay, so let me tell you about the pendulum. It seems that I would be saying that wherever you are, it's just good. No, I'm not saying that. But you can learn lesson from either ways. But at the middle of the pendulum, there's a resting place we call Christ. It's the center. It's the very standard, the place where you rest. But it would take a while. It would linger a while before it goes to the middle when you're already tired
Okay.
of going on extremes.
I hear you.
Because extremes has always result and it has counter reactions. And these counter reactions, because they don't usually talk to each other and communicate with each other, tend to just clash. But at the end of the day, when they're already tired, they find Jesus. And when they find Jesus, they find the solution in Christ.
Okay. Pastor, I don't know if you'll be able to answer this. We can take it out later. But in that pendulum that you were explaining, how would you know that you are at rest? Because maybe sometimes I might believe in something, say, how I would dress on the Sabbath or how I would cook on the Sabbath or standards of cooking or not cooking. How does one justify that for themselves or their conscience of taking in scripture and the spirit of prophecy and battling with that? How does that work?
Well, there might be different kinds of practice, okay, but the goal is how to abide in Jesus and be fruitful in Jesus. I think the very goal of this is mission. How to be fruitful, how to multiply, how to disciple is the end of this. But sometimes we overemphasize on practice. Others would say you should be lenient in the practice so that you could just rest in Christ. You could do that, but at the end of the day, how many have you discipled? How many have drawn to Jesus? At the other side, they would say you should be very strict and stringent in doing this and doing that. But in the pragmatic sense, how many have you led to Jesus doing this? So for me, without judging others or without even judging myself, the goal is for us to fix our eyes on Jesus and to enjoy the presence of Jesus. And because of enjoying this presence, you are able to attract people to Jesus. And I think this should be the result of wherever you are in the right or in the left. The result shows that everyone should be led to Jesus and to be in love with the God that we profess to love.
Yeah. You when you were talking there, Pastor, you reminded me about my dad. I remember growing up in that type of scenario, and my dad was very adamant of me reading the Bible and a lot of the books. So if you go to our house in Pampanga, you would see my mom's shelf full of Ellen G. White books.
I've seen it.
So it's there. So I grew up in that context. But I remember my dad explaining that very same thing to me. that there may be standards that my dad wants me to be in, and as I grew up older, he knew that my standards may change because of the generation, but he always drew me back to where God's love is seen the brightest. And I can understand now where you say that God's rest is in the middle, is because that's where I find that security, that rest, that yes, there are practices that might be on either side, but that doesn't actually point me to Jesus until I am at Jesus. Until I'm there, right? Maybe some of those, correct me if I'm wrong, but maybe some of these practices of both sides are the ways so they could disciple themselves, but we shouldn't put that on other people. You said judgment of other people, like we're fitting them into our box. Is there, because you also work in the Adventist history part, is there any story or context that you could share with us that kind of shows that, where even in historical ways there was a way that they were balancing themselves as well?
It took a while before we can say balance. Even now, there are imbalances to the church. But at the very start, during the Advent movement of William Miller, we were so focused on the coming of Jesus. We forgot about the law. We forgot about anything. In fact, Sabbath was introduced before the Great Disappointment, and yet no one would care because they're already expecting for Jesus to come. Jesus was the main thing. And then the Great Disappointment came, and we need to explain ourselves. And we have seen the glory of the sanctuary. We have seen the 10 Commandments. And for us, this was the thing. Until we lost sight of that Jesus that William Miller was preaching. And Ellen White felt that Jesus until 1888, when everyone left Jesus for the law and the Sabbath. And everyone becomes so legalistic that Ellen White says, no, this is not the message we received from William Miller. We were so in love with Jesus. And Jesus was everything to us. And now we have left Jesus altogether. And so Ellen White knew for herself what was preached during that time is not the one that is being preached right now. So we went back there. But that created so much debate that it took a while before everyone would understand that Jesus should be the one that should be preached. And even now, after 1888, it has not reached, I would say, the dark parts. Says 2 Peter chapter 1:19, that we study the prophecy so that the light of dawn will rise in the dark parts or the dark places. And that dark part is the heart, where the morning star should arise in the hearts of the dark parts. And even now, it has not penetrated the hearts of the people. They know how to keep the Sabbath, they know how to keep the law, but was Christ, the morning star, risen in the hearts of the people? That is the goal of the Spirit prophecy.
Is that also some of your strategic goals with your department? You said you were talking with universities and some of our schools around our division. Is that why we're doing it, so that we're able to showcase the importance of the lessons that we've learned in the past?
Let me ask you a question.
Okay, back to me.
When people are baptized, are they asked whether they believe the Spirit prophecy and Ellen White? Most of it, no. I was baptized with this question, and it was just shoved over. Just answer it. And and no one actually intentionally talked about Ellen White. It was not even preached in the pulpit or during the evangelistic meeting. We just accept it just as it is. No education whatsoever. Now, when the Spirit prophecy, and in 13th division, SSD is the only division that has full-time Spirit of Prophecy department that is not joined with the publishing. So which means that we are starting anew. It's not even found anywhere. And then we have to create our counterparts. Not only on the side of the departments in the conference, missions, and unions, but what about in our academic institutions? So now we are beginning. Let me orient you that in Thailand, today, this week, the executive committee of the Joint Conference will approve that in Thailand we will have a research center funded by the Joint Conference and SSD. So it has division, EGY director and research center. Also in 2 universities in Indonesia, we will be creating 2 research center there. One has already a research center director now, we have elected. 2, one in MVC, Mountain View, and also in CPAC is now. And we are expecting like 3 more to be created. This is unprecedented. In only a span of 1 year, we have multiplied. It will take 30 years for other division to do this, but we have just done it in 1 year. I'm excited.
What do you think, Pastor, is going to be the impact of that? I know you have visions, you have dreams, of course. What do you think this is going to do for our church here in Asia?
Education, I would say. Because Asia is different from America. In America, the extreme is on the other side. Here, we are so faithful with the Bible and spirit prophecy, but we are also, I would say, sincerely wrong in our interpretation.
The way you say it, Pastor. Okay.
So our part is to educate our people. That's why you would expect that there will be certification from membership, spirit prophecy certification from membership, and there will be elders will be regularly teaching, like monthly in the afternoon, how to, about Ellen White and spirit prophecy. Certification of theology students, certification of pastors, certification of workers. All levels will be certified from level 1 to level 5 about spirit prophecy. If we will not do this, we will lose our distinction. And spirit of prophecy is not just a distinction, it's a lens that we use in order to see evangelism, salvation, mission, almost anything, everything. Because the spirit of prophecy is assigned in how to interpret the Bible. And the way you interpret the Bible, you also use to interpret the spirit of prophecy.
Correct. Yeah. Like you were saying, Pastor, the sincerely wrong part. I don't want to dig too much into it.
It captures your attention.
It struck me there for a moment. So what are those, do you have some challenges that are on your mind right now or that you see in our church? What are some of these challenges that hopefully through the education process, it will help realign and hopefully slow down the pendulum maybe?
I think it is not only rampant in the church. It can be seen all across the generation, especially this gullible generation that just accepts anything, anything. And I would say that even if you read newspapers and all of this, miscontextualization is always there. They just want to interpret anything that benefits them, that suits them, even if it destroys anyone. And if Ellen White is here or the authors of the Bible are here, they would really cry out, this is not what I really wanted. And oftentimes I misquoted from what I say. So I think there should be an education of how to interpret. Let me lead you very quickly to, how to interpret anything, not only the Bible, but anything. First is that if you read something, you would want to ask, what is the connection of this reading to all the things that has been written? Not only by the person, but anything that is around that person. Even the things that that person reads brings context to what she said or her. Second is not only the context of the person, but the language of the person, because language changes from time to time. And so we must also read not only the Bible, but Ellen White, what does she mean, what she said. But oftentimes, we just want to put our words, eisegesis, on what Ellen White said because it suits us. And this should be, our people should be educated on this. Otherwise, they would be led, and they are already led. We have seen thousands of Seventh-day Adventists led on that wave, wave of actions and misunderstandings and already broken relationship just because of wrong interpretation. And that's a burden for this department.
Yeah, I growing up, with my dad, he would lead me down that path of trying to interpret or trying to understand the context. And I I remember internet was a new thing, and my dad asked me a question, and my dad was like, we were reading. I forget what we were reading, but he was reading something, and he said, I wish I got a chance to see Ellen White's library, like what was in her library, not the things she wrote, but the books and everything. And we had internet at that time, and so but we were still in Pampanga, but we had internet back then, and I searched, and there was a website that I found that had all of the books sort of like categorized what was in her, and it was interesting to see some of the books that she was.
What were she reading?
What she read, even about evolution, that even the volume. My dad was surprised at the volume that she had, and since he was a teacher pastor, he said, "Yeah, I read that book also, and it had that understanding of evolution. It was a certain version because because back then, my dad would have encyclopedias, and there were every year there's a different version, right? And my dad would have a memory of that particular version. He goes, yeah, that's why she said it like this, because we had to get the context that she was living in, what was on the books that were just fresh off, and to think that those books of health and evolution, they were fresh off the press from Europe, and yet it was in her house, wherever that location was. So it's interesting to learn that context is important.
Yeah, and not only the language, not only the context, not only the knowledge of the person, but also how it correlates to the time when she was telling it. So oftentimes, people would just quote Ellen White from this time when she was not yet has changed. Ellen White would change her positions from time to time as light would. But people would just quote her from this time when she believed this, and people would just say, why don't we just stay where she believed this? But Ellen White did not stay there.
Correct. I did see a transition. One of the things that I instantly caught onto while reading her books was that as the books, her age was getting older, and I think this is like the time when she was outcast out to Australia. Those books had more of a Christ-centered. I don't know if it was language, because it spoke. It spoke more to me when I was younger than the older books of the Great Controversy and the Spirit of those books were different than
because of the emphasis of her time.
Yes, correct.
Remember, they were Protestants back in 1844. And they don't need to be taught about Jesus and salvation. So they emphasize on the law because this is something new and no one. And these are our distinction. But time came when Seventh-day Adventists who came from Catholics, who came from other Protestants, just became Seventh-day Adventists. And the only emphasis they heard is about the law. And these people would overemphasize about the law. And Ellen White would just tell about anything and people would just accept it, like Sabbath keeping, all of it, because they knew it. But time when she observed that people nowadays have not heard about Jesus anymore. When we heard about Jesus all the way when we were young, it's all about Jesus. But now it's all about the law. Then Ellen White said, we have missed the most important foundation of Christianity, and that is Christ. So we can see the context. So she now emphasized again about Jesus because we have already forgotten the foundations. We were emphasizing on pillars, but we forgot about the foundations.
Pastor, is there a way for us, for the person who's not into the studies, or they just read the Sabbath school lesson, or they read the book from time to time, how would you go about in taking the insights that you read and discerning to apply them immediately to your life, or to maybe try to practice them? Is there a way of doing that, or is there a process of us reading? Because you said one of her writings may come from a different part of her lifetime, and there's another from her more recent. How would someone find those insights and start to apply them to their daily life?
That's a challenge.
Yes.
That's a challenge. It would take some education, I would say. Okay. That's why we need basic.
That's why we have the centers.
That's why the centers, the Spirit of Prophecy, now the directors now are being trained now. In fact, we will be investing so much money just for all our directors across the division, or even the conference directors, to go to IAS, to study at least 3 weeks of 2 subjects per year, 7 subjects all in all, just for them to be experts so that they can also orient the elders, the pastors. Because if I do it alone, how do I do it?
Yeah.
And then we are also beginning a new live television program every Monday night, Sharing the Vision, where I will be speaking, and my host is also an E.G. White graduate. We need to educate them because television reaches them quick. Now, going back to that, it would take a while, but if they are oriented of the tools that are available, they can just go to ellenwhite.org. This is a quick way that I can say. Just go to ellenwhite.org and then just type anything, like your questions or anything that comes to mind. Almost all of it are already there. They will guide you, lead you to the answers of your questions. That's how I did. I mean, I don't know anything when I was 8 years in the White Estate. But when I was beginning there, I would say this single website can help you almost anything. ellenwhite.org. There's a search box there. Just put anything like vaccine or anything, and it will show you there is nothing new under the sun.
Mm-hmm.
It's all there available.
So someone who's maybe starting out their journey of finding the insights or discernment from the spirit of prophecy, having this website already has the Q&As, common questions with common answers.
Yes.
Okay, so this tool can, I think that is a good way, for the quicker way, of course, for you to, because I know that through your strategy, maybe this will take a good 5 years down the path for the certification and more experts to
but
be.
But I was not certified when I began this website.
Yes.
When I was looking at this website, there was no education at all. But it educated me. I spent more time in that website. And now I, fairly, because of all the questions that was thrown to me, it grew me because I need to search that, and I need to orient people, I need to teach. But I just saw that this is a wellspring of knowledge if you go to this website.
Yeah. You were saying, Pastor, there's nothing new under the sun. But as we develop our centers and our Adventist Heritage Centers, do you think there's going to be anything new added to our knowledge or context-wise in the different places within our division? Is there like historical things that we have not yet uncovered, maybe?
Oh, now let's talk about history. That's another.
That's a totally different topic now.
Totally different topic, but it's equally important, because the spirit of prophecy, one of the works of the spirit of prophecy, is to maintain the heritage of the church, the history of the church. Because if we forget about the past, Ellen White says, we have nothing to fear of the future unless we forget how God has led us from the past, and also the teachings and the lessons of the previous history. So history is very important, because if you forget about the history, you forget about the context of how it happened. And we showcase the glory of God, or how God led us from the past, and how we would learn not to do the wrongs in the past and how to improve the rights in the past. So is there anything new? I tell you, when I started, even here in the Adventist history, we have not known anything yet.
Okay.
That's why I need the primary resources. I need the primary resources. Right now, I'm going around all archives and encouraging, even to the point of making a policy that no Adventist public document must be disposed without proper approval from an authority that must have. Because these are all important, even to the point of all our offices must not dispose even their correspondence. It must be submitted yearly to the archives, because all of this will compose our history. Newsletters must be written, because these are one that composed the history. Now I was looking back at 1905, 1906 of what happened in Australasian Union, the record. I was looking back there. Had it not for the diligent reports and diaries of these people, I would not have known the stories. And I cannot find it anywhere. Only if I go back to the primary resources that were digitized by the archives, Adventist archives here digitized. If it was not for that, I would not have known all the detailed story of how it happened.
So we're here, Pastor, on this side of the world, right? That's from the GC, and I mean, I know that the church was organized differently back then. Now we're a division here, comprising of 11 different countries. How far back have you gone with these set of countries and the organization of the Far Eastern Division? Do we have records that go back into the 1960s and beyond?
Let me orient you a little.
Okay, please.
Because we are now building the Adventist heritage, and finally we will give leaflets of an orientation. But this very straight quickly. We started way back. Of course, the first ever Adventist person who reached Asia was Abraham LaRue. But he was not official. 14 years after was the official missionary to China, 1902. But all the works that was done in these countries of Southern Asia Pacific Division started in Australia, back in Australasian Union Mission or Conference, and then that was sent here. Names that could be remembered is Munson, when he was ordained. He was ordained one day after his baptism, and then he wanted to be a missionary in 1898. He wanted to be a missionary to the Philippines in 1898. But the first missionary to the Philippines was 1905. Can you just imagine that? 6 years after. Mm-hmm. These are histories that can only be traced if you go back to even the agenda, the minutes of the mission board, of the General Conference, that you have to be very diligent to know the story. Even the story of how we sent the missionaries here from Australia, like Robert Caldwell. He was 24 years old, bachelor, and then Erwin appealed who will go to the Philippines, because Philippines gets their meat from Australia and their butter from Australia, and they must also be getting their spiritual food from Australia. And then he said, I will go. He was 24 years old, bachelor. And then he went here, and he was canvassing from Philippines, Siam, which is Thailand, and also Singapore at the same time. And Mac Elhani was sent here in the Philippines. He stayed in Moralia Street, Calle Fundacion in Intramuros, where we visited. And then they moved to Ermita, and then they moved back to Padre Paura, and then they moved to Pasay. How would you ever find all of this if you don't go back to the... And it is not written even in the history books.
I mean, you're enlightening me right now. I mean, knowing these things gives me more pride of being what we're doing today in terms of mission work. And, of course, the dedication that I have even to the gospel mission itself. Because if they were doing that in 1800s, what more today in 2024?
That's why I was talking to Pastor Chris and said, Pastor Chris, you need to write your news, because your news is history in the making. And so he was enlightened.
Yeah, Pastor Chris, he's our mission president in Timor-Leste. Very challenging. Yeah, you and I were there just a couple months ago, right? It's all coming back to me now. So taking things and archiving them is important for us. How can we get involved? I mean, is there a way for our members to get involved with finding these artifacts, or maybe looking into because if you go to our church, right, I'm pretty sure if you open one of the old doors, the cabinets, I'm going to find something that's older than me. I mean, is there something that our members that we can do?
Okay. First, your records from the very beginning. Your records, if it is 50 years old and above, submit anything, all to the conference archives. And then the conference archives will digitize it. That will be the direction of the secretariat.
This is photos and
anything.
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 Okay.
Anything. And it is the Adventist Archives. Now we are forming now a League of Historians. Maybe in July, we will be forming. I will be organizing the League of Historians, and we will be putting up a regular periodical, writing all this history and putting markers to these historical places, so that we can again reread and re-inspire people about our history. Can we do to surrender all historical records to your archives? Even photos or any articles that has historical value, give it to the archives, and then we will process all of this so that it could be digitized, it could be cataloged, and we would have all the access across the division electronically. Then historians can now, and we will, all Spirit of Prophecy Conference and Missions and Unions are all official historians right away, besides the other historians. And we will be requiring them actually to write history and tell us about what happened many years ago.
These things, Pastor, that you're going to be writing in right now and also in the future, is this going to go on any special platform that people can look up on?
We are developing our own website. We are already talking with the IT so that this website will be a database to feature, of course, database of all information, but at the same time, this would also be a platform by which people can go and see what is new and what were the things that were forgotten that can now be remembered and can inspire people. Let me give you a little example of how we can inspire people. Robert Caldwell was the first missionary in the Philippines. And you know, his most economical strategy in canvassing is to buy bicycle. And so he bought bicycle, it was recorded. And do you know where his favorite canvassing place was? No. Baguio City.
From Manila?
Yes.
He biked to
yes.
He biked to Baguio.
Yes, and there were no bridges. There were no bridges that we have right now. And how many hours would it take for him to go to Baguio with his bicycle with all the books that he has?
Yeah.
And now we would complain about canvassing? What a shame. If we can only tell this story to our young people today, how many would be inspired? Can you just imagine? He would bring the bike with the boats that we have without katig, and he would bring this until he goes to, because Baguio is the place where all Americans go. And he would canvass the Americans there. If we can only tell these stories, how many young people would dare to do missionary work? But these were forgotten, as if this cannot be related now. No, it's relevant until today.
You know, Pastor, it's been a great time talking with you. I know there's more that we can dive into, but if you had the moment to share a special message to those who are watching, something about that would inspire them to continue to look at the Spirit of Prophecy and to know more about our heritage as Adventists, I'll give you that time.
This is an opportunity for me to link. Ellen White in Australia once wrote when she said, "The isles of the sea are crying for the law." And this was read by our people. One that read it is Caldwell and also Finster. Now, let's go to Caldwell. Caldwell, writing on a report, said that Philippines, 8 million people, if you read your Bible, every letter in the Bible, count it, there are as much as times 4. Times it with 4. And the product of that is as the numbers of the people in the Philippines. And they are dying each day without knowledge of Jesus. Now let's go to Finster. Finster said that the Philippines, many are dying because of idolatry. And they are the pearl of the Orient, perlas ng silangan. But there are pearls that need to be dived at the bottom of the sea in darkness. And there are many pearls at the bottom of the Philippine in darkness that we need to sacrifice to dive several meters just to open this and get the pearl so that it can see the sunshine. All of these were written, and their passion for Filipinos. And these are not even Filipinos. They're so passionate about us. If we can only see all of this, writings of Ellen White, how it relate, and even the story of Abraham Laru. If we can only tell these stories, know these stories, many more will become missionaries. Just hearing one story and appeal, and people will go. And they will say, I will go. Let us tell the story, let us know the story, let us feel the story, and be participant in that story.
Amen. Thank you, Pastor, for your time. For those who have enjoyed this episode, if you have any questions or thoughts, put it in the comment below. And again, Pastor was also sharing with us a website. You go to the ellenwhite.org. And you can use it as a tool as you go down your journey in learning more about the spirit of prophecy. And, you being here on this podcast and staying this long with us, we thank you so much for that. If you want to listen to our other episodes, head over to our Spotify account. And we hope that as you learn more about our church, you will become inspired and, of course, have a pride to share the love of Christ in your local neighborhoods. Until the next podcast, we'll see you.